Howdy folks, Dave here at Thunder Mesa Studio, where today I'm going to be jumping right back into where we left off with the ON30 San Lorenzo mini layout. If you're just getting caught up on this project, basically what I'm doing is taking Verne Niner's award-winning San Lorenzo diorama and converting it into an ON30 mini layout, a portable 2 by 4 foot layout that I can take to shows and meets so everyone can enjoy Verne's wonderful work. And what I really want to get done this week is to add some lights and sound effects to the layout. So come along and we'll see what we have to work with here. Now, Verne did not add lights to the structures when he originally built the San Lorenzo diorama. I added some lighting later on when I incorporated it into the original Thunder Mesa layout. But the diorama did have a wonderful soundtrack which played on this right here. This is a Pricom Dream Player from Pricom Electronics. And Jim Wells over at Fantasonics Engineering, you've heard me talk about Jim here on the channel before. He created the soundtrack for this, and it's this wonderful little altercation that goes on between the bandits here at the fountain and the pig. It's pretty funny if you listen to it. Sadly, we lost Jim Wells recently. He passed away. So, you know, this is kind of dedicated to him now as well as it is to my late friend Verne Niner. Over here on this table, I've dug out all of the components for the lighting system. These are actually all the original LEDs that I used when I set the structures up on the Thunder Mesa layout. And there's no reason why I can't use them again. Most of these are solid yellow LEDs. These are 3mm solid yellow LEDs. They work with 5 to 12 volts. And got a couple flickering ones too. I think I've got one for the cantina that also flickers. Sometimes I like to group them together like I've done here. So I've got a solid one and a flickering one, which just gives a nice bit of interior atmosphere. Also got a little wiring bus right here to hook the lights up to. And then I have a 9-volt DC transformer. The sound system is going to run on a 12-volt transformer. I've got one of those too. And I like to have the lights run on a separate system from the sound. It's just a good practice, I think. It makes it easier to troubleshoot and find problems and things like that. And I don't want to have the lighting lit by the 12-volt system. I like to underpower them a little bit so they last a little bit longer. So we're going to use the 9-volt system for this. And naturally, I'm going to have to take everything off of here again. I've just got this all set in place temporarily. I'll take these trees off. Some of the sharp-eyed among you may have noticed that I switched the position of the mercantile and the jail. The original diorama, the jail's on this end, the mercantile is right there. I wanted to move it out here because it would make sense to have it closer to the tracks where I've got this little spur. I'm creating a little mini scene down here with a platform, and I think I'm going to build a little shed right here too. But right now what I want to do is go back again and trace the positions of all the structures one more time, because now I've got them in their final spots, and I want to be able to, reposition them once I get the lights installed. By the way, I think I forgot to mention, I will be putting links down in the video description to all of the components that I use for lights and sounds in this video. Unfortunately, you can't get sound systems from Jim Wells anymore, but you can still get the Pricom Dream Players and the Dream Player-Lites and the milliamps. They still sell all that stuff. Looking forward to getting this step done because, every time I move these structures, there's always a risk of damaging them. So once the lights and everything are installed, I won't have to move them again. Okay. Now each one of these structures is a little bit different job from a lighting standpoint. Some of them have floors, some of them don't. The cantina has a floor. The mission, it doesn't really matter because there's only light in the upstairs window. And I'll show you, most of these were made from Tom York hydrocal kits. It was just basically a plaster shell. So I've got to figure out some way to prevent light from leaking out around the bottom edges of these. I've got a pretty good idea how to do that. So my solution for this is to build a little lighting box that this is going to sit right down on top of. So I've got some cheap cardboard. This stuff's about 1/16 of an inch thick, a little less. I'm going to trace that. And in that footprint, I'll build my little box. And so the light will be inside of that, and you won't get light leaks down around the bottom of the structure. Now, let's see how thick these walls are. Wow. About 3/8 of an inch, yep. So I'll measure in 3/8 of an inch all the way around. Now, Verne's got a little scene set up in here where El Oso Blanco, the prisoner, is propped up inside of here on a chunk of foam so that he can look out through the bars of the window. Put our light, our LED, right in the middle of this. And make some sidewalls for the little lighting box. And those really don't need to come up more than about an inch. All right. Okay, well, I'm going to drill my hole for the LED before I glue these sides into place. That was easy. Get a little white glue on there. Put it inside that line, so I've got plenty of, plenty of slop to work with. Now this should fit right down on top of it. Just like that. Now this will go on the layout right here where my outline is. Now I can also mark where the hole is going to be through the foam for that LED. There's a lot of ways to put holes down through the foam, but my favorite way is probably just a bamboo skewer like this. Quick and efficient. Get a nice press fit with the LED in that hole. And then we'll run the wires down here through the foam. By the way, I have tested all of these LEDs to make sure that they work. Now I can glue this down to the foam. That'll be a permanent installation there. I like this tight bond quick and thick glue for this. Works great. Very similar to Eileen's tacky glue, but it comes in a bigger bottle. Now I want you to know that I've taken note of where the windows are so that what you'll get when the lights are on is indirect lighting. You won't see an LED through the bars in the window. You'll just get an indirect light as if the lantern is off, in a corner somewhere. Now, once the ground cover and everything is in, you will not be able to see the edges of this cardboard at all. For the cantina, this one has a floor on it that Verne made out of looks like some plastruct tile. A little dusty. And so I just need to measure in and find where this hole needs to be. Right about there. All right. For the cantina now, I've got 2 LEDs because I want it to be a little bit brighter, you know, a little bit more light coming out of there. And I've wired these together, so I've only got 1 set of leads coming off. One is a flickering yellow and one is a solid yellow. I'll just show you what that looks like here. There we go. You see how that one's flickering like that. And this will be back once again in the rear corner of the structure, so it'll be indirect lighting. And for this one, the structure's got a floor in it. I think I could just feed the wires down here through the hole. I want it to be right about there. That'll fit over the top just like that. See what that looks like. Let's do a little test right now, shall we? That's perfect. That's perfect. All right. You can see the bartender in there. For the assay office, I had to build another lighting box, just like I did for the jail. Get that installed. And I had to build a somewhat larger box for the mercantile. Same exact idea though. I'm also going to go ahead and glue the mercantile structure into place. That's just a little bit easier with the lighting on the interior and the exterior. And unlike the other structures, the roof on this one is removable, so I can get in there and access the LEDs if I need to. And here you can see down inside the structure a little bit. There's the 3mm yellow LED. I've got it bent over so it doesn't stick up too high. And the wiring going to the front porch light, which is actually a grain of wheat bulb. It's not an LED. I made an interior ceiling for it, which is a piece of foam core attached to some cardboard, and this just sets down inside and prevents light leaks around the edges of the roof. And then the roof just sits in place like that. Fun fact, Verne made this stovepipe out of a bendy straw. That's just great. I love it. Now for the mission, things get interesting. Verne made this out of some solid blocks of green floral foam. And then there's like moldings and stuff from the jewelry department and all that kind of stuff stuck on it. And so there was no place to put a light inside. So I actually had to carve out, I can flip this up carefully so you can see. I had to carve out a space behind that front window where I want the light to show. Fortunately now the installation of the light is really easy. I just have to mark where that hole is and install the light on a stock right there. Now I've used a piece of clear plastic tubing around the wiring with the LED just sticking out the top there. And this is going to bring it up to the proper height and keep it in place right behind that upstairs window. Now I'm going to pot that in place with a bunch of cyanoacrylate. Put some baking soda all around that. Strengthen up that CA joint. All right. That should hold it. Okay. Now once that glue's dry on everything, I can take off everything else that isn't glued down and turn the whole thing up onto the backdrop so it's kind of sitting on that and finish all the wiring underneath. Well, you know, I thought I was ready to wire everything up. And then I remembered there's one more light I want to add inside of a structure by the market, the mercantile. And I decided I want a little shed down there that kind of ties the El Mercado to the trackside scene. So I went ahead and I laser cut some pieces, nothing too fancy. Now I'm just adding some distress and some wood grain to the scribed in boards here with the razor saw blade. And what the heck, I'll add some knot holes as well with a hard lead pencil. This is some 1/16 of an inch thick basswood that I'm using here. For wooden structures, I almost always like to stain all the wood before assembly. And ordinarily I would use my shoe dye and rubbing alcohol mixture for that. But I found this at my local hardware store. I love these Minwax stain markers. These are for like touching up furniture jobs, you know. And this is a new color, classic gray. Hadn't seen this one before, so I picked one up and I'm going to give it a try. See how it works on this project. Stuff goes on really nicely, and you can build it up in layers if you want a darker tone. I am going to paint this also, but the paint is going to be old and cracked and peeling, so I want the stained wood to show through underneath. Always want to go with the grain when you're applying stains like this. Well, that has dried to a nice silvery patina in no time, so I can start in on the assembly. I'm going to use some yellow carpenter's glue. You can see on this one, I did decide to add a floor, which is going to make it easier for adding the lights later on. I won't have to worry about light leaks or anything. Got a hole already pre-drilled in there. And that 1/8 inch thick MDF floor is going to keep everything nice and square. I've given myself some little tabs and slots here. Makes construction a lot easier. I always try to get glue on all of the mating surfaces. Now I'm going to use some of this 1x6 material to add a Z-brace to the door. Now I'll add some nail holes to that. The track nail in my pin vise. And I've got some Liquitex light turquoise. And I'm going to stipple it on. This is a stipple brush or a stencil brush. And what this does is it leaves little dots of paint. So you're going to get a look like it's old and weathered and flaking off. If you've been down to the border country, you see the buildings are very colorful. You see what I'm doing? I'm going down, but only to a certain point. I'm leaving it mostly bare down at the bottom where that paint would wear away the most quickly from rain splashing up and wear and tear and things like that. All right, I think we just about got it. Once that's dry, I like to go back with some fine sandpaper. Just go over it a little bit. Knock that back a little more, take some more of that paint off. Try to make it look like it hasn't been repainted in quite a while. I'm going to go ahead and put the door in. And I want this to be a door that opens inward because it's an external door. I've got a little block of, what is this, 4x6 here. And that's just going to give me a place to glue the edge of the door because I want it to be ajar. I want it to be partially open. Before I finish this and put the roof on, Use it to mark where the hole is going to be for that LED. That should fit right down on top like that. Perfect. All right. Now I can add the rafters. These just fit down into these slots. I can go ahead and put the window together now. This is cut from some 25 1/1000th of an inch thick laser board. Nice crisp pieces. Great for layered stuff like this. And that's how these little assemblies usually go together. You start with flat pieces and you put one layer on top of another until you get a three-dimensional assembly, a three-dimensional look. Okay, that's all together. Now I'm going to get some flat gray primer on it, so when I paint it, I can simulate the look of the old wood showing through from underneath. Now I'm taking my 1x6s that I stained for the trim and dry brushing on some plain white. Dry brushing it because I want them to look like they're old and faded and peeling and cracked like the rest of the paint job. And then I can start trimming this out. I'll start on this side over here where the door is. Now with the primer dry on the window, I'll give that a dry brushing of white as well. Now I've got some clear acrylic to glaze the window with. I'll apply that with some of this Zap Canopy glue, which is the best thing I've ever found for this particular job. Also used my hobby knife to add a couple of cracks to the window. That always adds a little bit of character to have at least one broken pane in there. I don't want people to be able to look in and see the LED, so I'm going to fog the window. And the easiest way to do that, the oldest tricks in the book, some Scotch magic tape. Just got to burnish it to make sure you get all the air bubbles out. Now just a little bit of glue around that outside edge. Just like that. And for the roof, I'm going to keep it pretty simple. Cut a piece of chipboard to size here. And I'm just coloring the corners with my gray marker, or the edges, I should say. And then under the eaves, at least where it's going to show. Now I can apply some glue to all the rafters and the edges. I want to overhang about a foot on each side. That looks about right. For the roofing material itself, I want to have a corrugated roof. And I'm fortunate enough to have a product here that Chris Bond at Full Circle Models, he sent me a sample of this. And I will put a link down below. This is a corrugated, like cardstock, heavy paper really, that's been printed with weathering and rust already on it. Look at that. All right, now I'm cutting it into scale 3x8 foot sheets. And I'm just going to use some diluted white glue to apply this. I have it overhang just a little bit on the sides and on the bottom. And I want to have it overlap. Have the next one overlap by about 6 scale inches or so. For the upper course, I'm going to cut those sheets in half, so they're about 3x4 feet. Well, that works, doesn't it? Now I've just got these final 2 rafters to add to finish off the edges of the roof. Well, I think a structure like this has got to have some signs and posters on the walls. So I've dug into my collection here. This is a Frioline logo that I designed for Verne. Frioline was a fictitious fuel, which was a product of out of San Lorenzo. There was a small refinery there. It was a gas made of, well, it's made of beans. Draw your own conclusions. The slogan was, if you're not gassing with Frioline, you don't know beans. It's a great running gag. Anyway, got to have that on the layout. And of course, Lester's Ammunition. Their slogan, it usually works. Of course, keep out signs are always good on something like this. I always paint the edges of paper signs, usually just with a little watercolor, just to gray that down a little bit. Of course, we got to have a poster for the Thunder Mesa Mining Company, right? Okay, I think that's probably pretty good. I don't want to overdo it. I just want to do a little final weathering down here with some chalks. Add a little bit more grind. This building is right next to the tracks, so it's going to be darn grimy. Well, I think I can go ahead and put this into place now. I am going to glue it down to the base of the layout, but I'm not gluing it to the mercantile building there. Well, this is shaping up to be a fun little scene, I think. The platform here was originally in Zocalo Plaza on the Thunder Mesa layout, along with all the details and the steps and all of that. Even these cases of tequila and a couple of cases of Puerto Borracho's finest, courtesy of Gary Beatty. Thank you, Gary, very much. The stone retaining wall back here is actually carved from some polyurethane foam. Sorry I didn't show you the process, but there's going to be a lot more retaining walls and things to do before I'm done with this layout. So I will detail that process for sure in a future episode. But right now, it is time to hook up all of the lighting. Okay, well, now I have the layout balanced up on the backdrop. It's fairly sturdy for the moment, but this is going to make it a lot easier to install all the components for the lighting and the sound systems. The first thing I want to install is this wiring bus. Put it right over here. I want to keep most of the wiring, the electrical components close to each other. It's just going to make it easier to troubleshoot, have everything right in one area if I have any kind of problems. So I'm going to mount this to the benchwork right here. So now each one of these LEDs that I installed will go to one of these pairs of terminals. So we've got positive on the left side and the negative leads on the right side. And I just need to keep that consistent throughout because LEDs are polarity specific. If you wire them up backwards, they won't work. And this is 28 gauge solid core wire that I'm using. And yes, it's exactly the same black and red wire that I use to, hook up the power to the track with, which in retrospect, probably not a great idea, but this layout's small enough that I can probably keep it all straight. And some of these, the leads aren't quite long enough, so I have to solder on longer wires. Here I'm ganging together the light in the shed I just installed and the flickering LED lantern that's out on the porch there. And then I always finish off those connections with some heat shrink tubing. I think this is the last one. I like to bend the wires over like that. Put them in the terminal. Gives it a little bit more to bite onto. I'm going to cable all of these together. A little bit of gaff tape just to make it somewhat neater. And there is the wiring for all of those LEDs. Going up around and into the 9-volt bus. Got quite a few terminals left over just in case I want to add some more. And here's that 9-volt transformer, wall wart. You can see right on there, it says what it's rated at. AC adapter. Turns 120 AC into 9 volts DC. A lot of times these little wall warts come with like a plug of some kind on the end, and you just have to snip that off and strip the wires. That's what I've done here. Now in this setup, I've designated the A terminal as positive and B as negative. We'll see if I guess right on these wires. Okay. Now to plug it in and see if the lights work. All right, success. Here's an angle you don't often see a model railroad from. Well, now I can install the sound system. What you have here, you have two basic components. The larger one on the bottom, that is the Pricom Designs Dream Player-Lite. And this thing on top here with the volume knob, that is the milliamp. The red and white wires are connecting these so they can both be powered. I'll need to add DC power coming in, probably to this terminal right here. You see I've marked it power so I don't forget. Then you've got a terminal here for a trigger. If you want one, you can have a push button trigger on here. And we do want that. And over here on this side, here's the micro SD card, which has the sound files on it. Now I mentioned at the top that sadly Jim Wells is no longer with us, so you can't get the sound files from him anymore. But you know, if you're handy with a program like say GarageBand or something similar, you can cobble together your own sound file for this. It's a WAV file format, which has a better sound quality than an MP3 usually. And yeah, just contact Pricom Designs and they can give you all the specs for what you need to make a sound file for one of these. I'm going to mount this right here to the bottom of the roadbed, where I'll be able to easily reach under and access the volume knob. Just have a couple of wood screws here. Now for this one, I have a 12-volt wall wart. I'll hook that up right here to the input terminal on the milliamp. Now keeping a close eye on which one is the ground and which one is the positive. I know it's kind of hard to see what I'm doing under here, and I apologize for that, but it really can't be helped. Just not a lot of room to work with. Right now I'm hooking up the push button, the momentary on push button. There's a little terminal here marked trigger, and that's where that goes. I think I neglected to point out what this cable is here. This is just an audio cable that goes from the Dream Player to the milliamp. It's a double male audio cable. Well, now if I've done everything right here, all that's really left to do is hook up the speakers. I've got these nice 2-inch speakers, and when you guys weren't looking, I used a hole saw to cut some holes in the front of the benchwork to let the sound through. Now I just need to mount the speakers behind those holes and hook them up to the milliamp. So first I need to carefully solder some speaker wire to the tabs here. Like that. So this one will be left. Okay, got the 12-volt plugged in, and I've got a green indicator light here, so here goes nothing. I love it when a plan comes together. Okay, I've got all the structures back in place and the power is turned on, so we can see how everything looks with the overhead lights turned off. And now that I've got the figures set up here around the fountain too, the soundtrack makes a little more sense, so let's test that one more time. And that's going to be a wrap for this one today, but there's a lot more to do on this project, so I hope you are subscribed with those notifications turned on so we can see you back here again next time. You can also follow Thunder Mesa for free over on Patreon. That's patreon.com/ThunderMesa, or on Instagram at thunder.mesa. And you can check out the resources available on the Thunder Mesa Studio website. That's thundermesa.studio. As always, a huge thank you to our Patreon members who help to make these videos possible. Until next time, keep moving forward, everybody. Adios for now.